our students are learning, we're also learning and evolving as teachers. No matter how long you've been in the classroom, it's really important to remember that you are part of the learning. You're also a learner, right? That's one thing that I try to keep in mind. So no matter how long I've been teaching or how long you've been teaching, we are all able to continue to learn. So our agenda for today is we're going to be talking about the importance of connection. And then we're going to talk about a few really important strategies for an effective teacher, namely preparation, some strategies for engagement, and then we'll try to get to number 4 on this agenda list, but I'm not going to promise we'll get there. We'll see, which is how to differentiate our content. And some of our norms are very simple, very basic classroom norms, which are to please be fully present. And inshallah, I know that we all have like other responsibilities, and mashallah, we have people from all over the world. So I've tried to think about that when I was creating this. And so I built in a 15-minute break in case you need to go. And depending on where you are, I don't know, maybe you need to pray or you need to, attend to something. Hopefully that'll allow for you to be present while you're here, and then you'll have that little break in the middle, inshallah. Number 2 is try to participate as much as you can. One thing with teaching is that, the more everyone participates, the more everyone kind of gains from the experience. So I fully appreciate participation with, first of all, cameras on. Second, feel free to hop in and make some comments. You should have the ability to unmute yourself if you would like to participate and have an important comment to make or something. So please feel free to do that. And finally, the last one is normal, just be kind. Now, so before we get started, I have an invitation for you all, which is that if you notice a teaching strategy that's being modeled, I want you to please go ahead and state that in the chat. And you can just start it with, I noticed, ... whatever that thing is. And again, we're trying to build a community of learners. And so by doing that, that might help somebody else. And I'll try and point out some of the things that I do that might be a teaching strategy that I'm trying to slip in through modeling, but sometimes I might not. So again, it's just another form of kind of interacting. So with that, let's go ahead and begin. Now, I hope that, inshallah, each of you has the ability to go ahead and open up another tab on your computer. And you're going to go to this website right here, join@slido.com. And you're going to enter in this code. And I'd like to learn more about each of you. And again, like I said, just because of the number of people that we have, mashallah, it would be unfortunately very impossible for us to go around and do introductions. So what I really would like to know is, where is it that you primarily teach right now? Are you temporarily online due to COVID? Are you fully online like all the time, regardless of COVID? Do you teach in person regularly? Or are you in a situation where it's hybrid learning? Because I'd like to get a feel for the audience. Alhamdulillah, I think Al-Kisa team, they gathered a bunch of information about where exactly everyone's teaching. And from what I saw, it looks like most of us are teachers at weekend schools, weekend Islamic schools, madrasas. Some of us at regular Islamic schools. I got that information, but what I don't know is how many of us are doing in person or hybrid. So this will really help me kind of get an idea. And I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but this is one of those things where I don't know if you guys have used this tool, slido.com. I think it's called Slido. It's a great tool to use if you are doing a lot of online, teaching at the moment, which allows you to get some interaction from your students. They have a couple of different options, and there's different websites that are doing this, but this is a really easy one that you can actually embed into your Google Slides. So there's no need to switch screens. You can actually embed it as an add-on. When you go into the Slido website, you make an account for yourself as an educator. You can create for yourself, an account, and then you have the ability to put it into your slides, which I find is super helpful, especially with the amount of Zooming that we're all doing these days. So it looks like a good number of people it looks like it's equal so far between in-person and temporarily online. Okay, that number is changing slightly. We have people that are still sending in their answers. Okay, well, this is great information for me. so that I can kind of tailor what I'm doing to meet the needs of the classroom. And again, this is going to be like an effective teacher strategy for our, those of us who are doing our online teaching, fully online or temporarily online. A tool to use when you're doing your online teaching is trying to use something like slido.com to quickly engage students, get some information from them, and have them involved, so that it's not just, it can be very one way when you're doing online teaching, can it? Okay. So I have a quote here that I would like to ask someone to volunteer to read. Go ahead and unmute yourself. The first person to unmute themselves go ahead and read it, please. And remember, the first norm was participation, or the second norm was participation.
Yeah, sure. I would like to read.
Go ahead.
The children of today love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect to adults and love to talk rather than work or exercise. They contradict their parents, chatter in front of company, gobble up food at the table, and intimidate their teachers.
Wow. What a quote. Okay. Thank you so much, Sister Khushi, for volunteering there. Now, what I'd like you all to do is to go ahead and use one of your Zoom features. If you can, if you agree with this statement, I would like for you to give a thumbs up so I can see it. Brother Salk, do we have that enabled right now? The thumbs up feature?
We do. And they can raise their hand as well if they want further questions.
Okay, and is there a thumbs down, Brother Salk, enabled?
I think so. It should be on.
Okay, so I want you to give it a thumbs. There is, good. Yeah. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you agree with this statement. I want a thumbs down if you disagree. And I would like maybe like this, the hands up or like the stop. If you are not sure, you're neither here nor there.
Sorry, sister, I can't find the thumbs down option.
Oh, is there no thumbs down option, Brother Salk?
No, it should be there. If they go in the section,
it's participants.
In the participant tab, yeah.
Thank you.
Some people are typing their answers, but if they want, they can also go in the participant tab and they can enter there.
Okay. All right. So I saw some symbols come up, and I saw some people agreed. I saw, some people didn't agree with it, and it is kind of a harsh statement, isn't it? Well, now let's see who said it. So the children of today love luxury. They're so bad-mannered, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is actually attributed to Socrates attributing to Plato. And this is 470 BC. So a long, long time ago. Now, the reason why I usually start with this quote is because I think it helps us gain some perspective as teachers. I feel like it's very easy for us to fall into this mindset or this idea, which kind of clouds our judgment. And we tend to think that it's just the children of today, like children these days. How many times do we hear that statement, right? We might make that statement as parents. We might make that statement as, as teachers to our colleagues. Oh, these kids these days, they're just so spoiled. They're just, they're such brats. They chatter and, they're like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. But in reality, when you think about it, this cycle, it has been going on for generations that, as going back as far as at least, what is this, BC, right? Probably way before that even. This idea that kids these days are just terrible is not real. It's really just exists in our mind. And I think that's really important when we're thinking about trying to build connections with children. Because when we have kind of these notions that, there's just something wrong with them, there's just something wrong with this generation, it builds this wall. It builds this barrier that doesn't allow us to fully connect to our children and see them for who they are. And we're going to get more deeply into that in just a moment. So the workshop today is actually going to be based a lot on this amazing book, which I highly recommend to any teacher. It's called The First Days of School, How to Be an Effective Teacher. And it's written by Dr. Harry Wong and Rosemary Wong. Have any of you ever used it before? Raise your hand if you have. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It gives you excellent information on all of the basics, like essentially anything that you would need as a first-year teacher, second-year teacher. Honestly, it's even a great refresher for people who have been teaching for a long time, but who really need to kind of like refresh their repertoire of skills. So I highly recommend this book. And a lot of what I'll be talking about today is based on this book and a few other books, which I'll get to later on. Now, in his book, Dr. Harry Wong breaks down effective teaching into like 3 main categories. One of those main categories is teachers' expectations of students. Okay. So again, this man, this book is, kind of world renowned, used like as a standard for like really best practices for teaching. And he's again broken down teaching into 3 main categories. One of those categories is that the teacher should have positive expectations for their students. And I'll go ahead and read his quote from the book. There's absolutely no significant research correlation between success and family background, race, national origin, financial status, or even educational accomplishments. There is but one correlation with success, and that is attitude. Now, the interesting thing here is that a lot of times we think that it might be the attitude of the student, but what it comes down to is actually the attitude of the teacher and the positive attitude and expectation that the teacher has of the student, and how that actually really changes the outcome for students. It's literally the only thing that research has shown where there is a big correlation between, the student's success or lack of success. It's the teacher. That's you all, mashallah. That's all of you. So really kind of embracing that, honoring that, and seeing what a great status you have and what great, Allah has given you such honor and such a truly impactful, a role of impact in this world. Now here's this wheel that I had just mentioned to you earlier, the 3 main characteristics of a effective teacher. You might want to take note of this. Again, positive expectations of the teacher is number 1. Then we have classroom management. Classroom management is a huge topic, and we're going to talk a little bit about it today. And then finally is lesson mastery. Lesson mastery means like your knowledge of your content. And it seems like, mashallah, you guys are having already a lot of trainings in this area where you're talking about your content and how do you become, very well versed in your content and how do you, share that content. So I won't be touching that too much today, but again, definitely we'll be talking about positive expectations and classroom management, which again are really big components of how to be an effective teacher. Okay, so I want to ask a question, which is, what is learning? Have you ever really thought about that? Anyone want to answer? What do they think? What is learning? And it is very basic sense. It's a weird question, right? Like we don't really think about it, but it's kind of a fundamental question. If you're a teacher, that's what you're doing all day long. What is learning? Does anyone want to take a stab at it? Go ahead and unmute yourself and give an answer.
Is it a process of...
Go ahead.
Knowing what you don't know.
Is that you, Sister Rukaya?
No, that's not me. I started, but then somebody else came in.
Okay, well, in the interest of time, why don't you go ahead?
Right. Okay. So I think learning is the opportunity to allow people to uncover and discover themselves, others, and the world.
Yeah. Good answer. I'm going to take it back down way down to its most simplest form for us to really kind of think about what it is. Learning essentially is about connections. And now if we take it back down to its most basic sense, if we look at the brain, we have neurons in the brain, essentially, right? And neurons are connected to one another through these synaptic connections. And I'm sure some of you in here are bio majors and doctors and so on, so you know this better than I do, but I'm explaining it just in a very basic sense. We have the synaptic connection between nerves, neurons, and learning is formed through those pathways. And that's why we say like the first 5 years of a child's life is very, very important, because they have such rapid brain growth happening, and there's so many connections being made in the brain that we want to really be careful about, like, you know, how we're raising our children and what kind of content are they, you know, exposed to and so on, because we have that rapid brain wiring essentially happening. So basically, on a very, very basic sense, again, it's about the connection. And so when I'm trying to teach multiplication to my 3rd grader, for example, right, I'm trying to, again, build the connection for that child. Well, multiplication, I can't teach though until I've already taught them addition. Is that correct? We have to build the connection between those two concepts. And I cannot teach addition unless I've already taught them number sense, right? They know their numbers. They know what the values of number 1, number 2, and number 3 are, right? So in that way, learning is really just essentially a million or trillion different connections. One idea on top of another idea, on top of another idea, on top of another idea. That's what's happening in our physiologically, right? In our brain when we are learning things. We're just connecting one idea to the next idea to the next idea all over the brain. And the more neural pathways we have, the more learning we have. Now, as teachers, how often do we think about how we are connecting with our students, though? There are many ways to connect with our students, and there's positive ways of connecting with our students, but there's also negative ways of connecting with our students. So what I'd like to do right now is do a little demonstration with you all. So if I can have you all actually just go ahead and take your hand and put it just kind of in front of the camera like this so we can see it. Okay, and I'm going to start to describe different parts of my hand and make a model of a brain with my hand. And as I'm doing it, I'd like for you to follow along, okay? So we have this right here. We're going to pretend our wrist is the spinal cord, okay? And then this fleshy part where our, our hand meets our wrist, we're going to say that that's our brain stem. Now, our brainstem is where we have kind of a lot of like the automatic functioning of the brain happening, of the body happening. A lot of things are processed here, like, your heart beating, digestion, breathing while you're sleeping. These are things that you don't actually have to think about. They just happen. And this part of the brain is where that is being processed. Now, after that, let's actually now go ahead and take our thumb and fold it over like this. And we are now going to pretend that this is our midbrain. Our midbrain is where we have a lot of memories, we have emotions stored, we have, we have our amygdala here, the limbic area. This is actually where our fight or flight reflexes, fight, flight, or freeze reflex happens, for those of you who have heard of that before, right? A lot of our emotion processing part of our brain is right here. And actually, this is also often called like the animal brain, this midbrain right here. So now you're going to take your fingers and fold them over your hand like this. And so now what we're going to do is, like, basically you're going to imagine that this is the back of your head. The occipital lobe is back here. This is like the fleshy part of the brain that we kind of always think of when we see a picture of a brain. This is where we have, it's called the cortex, right? And this is where we have our thinking part of our brain. We have, our temporal lobe, we have auditory processing, visual processing, motor cortex is here. So this is a lot where we have, kind of all of our sensory processing is happening here. Now, at the very, very front where your fingernails are, so if you were to imagine, again, this would be like where the forehead is, and this is the back of the head. Right here where your fingernails are, this is the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is where you have a lot of your higher order thinking happening. The way I think of it is like, this is like kind of like the computer of the brain, or like the major processing center of the brain. All of the input that you get from your brain is essentially being processed here. Your higher order thinking, morality, in fact, is processed here. Good decision making, bad decision making, all of those things really are happening here. So when we talk about like, you know, engaging students and really getting them thinking, what we're trying to do is activate this part of their brain. Now, as teachers, when we're trying to connect with our students, and connecting is one of the most important ways to really engage our students and be effective teachers, we have to try and get to our students here, right? But let me tell you, one of the times when teachers are most you know, connecting with students tends to be when there are trouble and when there are issues. Now let's see what happens when a child, for example, is in trouble, right? Let's say they didn't bring in their homework, or they're not paying attention in class. These things that, you know, as teachers, it kind of bothers us. You know, we're unable to get to our students. They're not listening. They're not paying attention. What happens actually is that child is upset and they're getting in trouble. What happens to their brain when they're feeling like that fear? Essentially, this thinking part of the brain flips up. And what do we have exposed here? What do we have exposed?
Fight or flight or freeze.
Fight, flight, freeze, emotions. A lot of strong emotions are here. And obviously the brain is not literally flipping up, but if you were to scan the brain during this time, essentially this part of the brain is no longer active. It is like completely not able to process anything any longer. And what you have exposed is a lot of emotion. And unfortunately, this is the time when teachers try and connect with their students, right? When is it that teachers give that one-on-one time to their students most? Research has shown us that the majority of teachers will only connect with their students when there's a trouble, when there's an issue, when there's some kind of problem. And unfortunately, at that time, when that student is not feeling good and their lid is flipped, and the teacher is coming and trying to, you know, talk to that student and connect with them and get them to think, that part of the brain which does a lot of the thinking is not there. Is this teacher going to be able to get through to that student? No. In fact, what's going to probably end up happening is that teacher is going to end up flipping his or her lid, because when you're trying to talk to that student and that student is just not having it, they're upset, they're, you know, not there for, you know, they're not trying to listen to you right now, they're upset, they're trying to leave your classroom, right? Or maybe they've completely shut down, depending on how they're processing. And you're trying to talk to them, and then you start to get upset. What happens to you as a teacher? You're
emotional as well.
I'm sorry?
You're emotional as well.
Yeah. You are no longer rational. Again, remember the prefrontal cortex, that's where our rational thinking, the control center of the brain, right? And I know that we've all probably experienced this, maybe as classroom teachers, maybe in our personal lives, maybe in our marriages, wherever it is. The worst time to try and connect with a person is when there is a problem. So I bring this up to you all because it's important to remember as teachers that there's good times to connect, and there's also negative ways of connecting with our students, right? And again, it's try and keep that in the back of your mind always as you're teaching. One of the important things to always remember is that you want to make sure that you aren't focusing in on the negative things and making that be like your main form of connection with your students, because unfortunately that is the time when we tend to give a lot of one-on-one attention. What we're going to try and do, we're going to talk about strategies today. How do we find positive ways of connecting with our students? How do we find those ways of creating community? How do we find ways of seeing the good and using that pathway of connection to really get to our students' hearts? Because at the end of the day, the most important thing that we can do as educators is touch the hearts of our students. I want you to all go back and just take a moment right now, close your eyes and think back to your favorite teacher. Go back to your childhood, maybe high school. Take a moment. Think about your favorite teacher. the person who was most impactful in your life. Someone who maybe touched you and touched your heart in some very special way. You probably remember a lot from that teacher too. So that's what we really want to focus on. Those teachers that we won't forget, that we can't forget, are the ones who have touched our hearts. And here's what it comes down to. What I was talking about earlier was kind of a lot of theory about, you know, how learning is based on connection and the neural pathways, and you have to start with numbers before you can get to multiplication. That was all kind of theory to help give us a basis for understanding that the most important thing that we need to do with our students is try to connect with them. There's a beautiful quote that I have here by Dr. James Comer. He's the author of a couple of good books. I don't have them listed here. But he says, no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. That is gold for us as teachers to remember. That sometimes we get so caught up in this idea that we really have to get, you know, this content to our kids. I really have to get them to memorize, you know, these ayahs of Quran, or I have to really get them to, you know, get this concept down, this, you know, whatever it is, that we forget that the most important thing is that we have to build that relationship with our students. We have to build that positive relationship with our students. One of the most important ways we can build those positive relationships with our students is through modeling really, really kind, beautiful, empathetic behavior. And we're going to talk more about that later on. But actually, before we do that, I do want to share one story with you all. Now, you know, earlier I talked to you guys about how the lid, you know, the lid will flip for the child, and the teacher's trying to connect with the student and trying to get them to, you know, do 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, X, Y, Z. And then the teacher's lid probably starts to flip, and then now we have trouble, right? Because the student is upset and the teacher is upset, and, you know, now we're going to the principal's office, right? I want to share a story with you. So sometime in the 90s, in the early 90s, there was a lab somewhere in Italy where they were doing research, brain research on chimpanzees. And what they were trying to study was actually like something about like the motor neurons in the chimpanzees and what motor neurons are used while they're eating. So essentially they had this chimp in the lab who was eating some nuts, brain was connected to the screen, the motor cortex was, you know, they were following the motor cortex neurons. He was eating these nuts and they were watching it. So later on, one of the lab techs walks in, and the chimp is no longer eating those nuts, mind you. That lab tech walks in, you know, he just like grabs some of the nuts, he starts eating them. And then lo and behold, what they saw, which was interesting, is that the chimpanzee was watching the lab tech eat those nuts. And what ended up happening on the screen, what they saw is that that brain for the chimp was firing as though he was eating those nuts. That's how they discovered something in the brain called the motor neurons. The mirror neurons. Some of you may know about it. We are literally wired on a neurological level to model and copy what we see. The chimpanzee literally felt like he was eating, and his brain was firing as though he was eating. And I'm sure you all have had like experienced a sensation when you see someone eat something really sour, all of a sudden your mouth starts to salivate, right? You're not eating that lemon, but you're experiencing it as though you're eating that lemon, right? Or if you see like a spider crawl on someone's arm, all of a sudden you start to freak out as well, and you feel like that spider's all over you, right? So subhanAllah, this is how Allah created us, literally on a neurological level, where we are wired to copy what's in front of us, especially at a young age. So one of the most important tools you have as a teacher is to remember that your relationship with that child, and your relationship really with anything around you, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you speak, all of those things is going to make an immense impact on that child, more than anything that you lecture about or talk about. It's really about what you're modeling to that child and that relationship that you're creating. This model that I showed you is actually called the brain in the hand model. And it's actually something that was kind of popularized by the author of this book right here, The Whole Brain Child, another book I highly recommend, Dr. Daniel Siegel. He is a neurobiologist, something, very, very fancy terms at UCLA. And he has written many amazing books about this idea of the whole brain child and really connecting the behavior of a child, how a student learns, and looking at the biology of how it's all happening. I really highly recommend it. He's the one who came up with this brain in the hand model. It's a great book. And there's another book, which I have here. It's called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. This book I first read when I was in college for one of my psychology courses. And essentially the author of this book, Bruce Perry, he's a very famous psychologist or psychiatrist who works on some of the worst cases, like with the CIA in the US. And this book is basically journaling his experiences when he went around and like saw these really horrible cases. I mean, like you can see from the title of the book, The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, right? Severe trauma, kids who've had a lot of trauma, whether it was raised as a dog or in really abusive situations or really, things like that. And the reason why I bring this book up when talking about the importance of a significant relationship is because essentially what this psychiatrist found out and his conclusion at the very end was that the most important and impactful thing for a child's learning is the relationships that are around them, the relationships that support them. It's not about the curriculum. It's not about the programs you're using. It's not about all those things. What really, really matters are the connections that exist amongst people, and the connections, especially with the teachers in the classroom. So again, these are just some books for you all if you want to deepen your learning. And if you're interested in the topic, I highly recommend you look into those, inshallah. I think one of the most important things for teachers to do is to try and connect using empathy for their students and really support the student as a whole. Oftentimes we look at the child and we really just narrowly define learning as like, the academics. What is the child learning in terms of content? But from an Islamic perspective, we know that our children are so much more than that. First, we have to see them as whole human beings, right? Oftentimes we look at children and we think of them somehow as like not fully like, almost, I hate to say this even, but like so many times I've experienced, especially in schools, unfortunately, where teachers don't see children as though they're full human beings. Like they don't give them the same respect or dignity or honor that they would to like an adult, for example, right? The way they might treat a child, they would never treat any other adult, right? Like no problem, like belittling them and, degrading them in public and so on and so forth. I think that's something that we as educators really have to think about. And when we connect with children is really to see them as full human beings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created from birth. They have the full soul, right? Yes, developmentally, physically, they're growing. Yes, cognitively, they're developing. Yes, in many other capacities, they're still developing. But are they a complete human being? Do they have a soul? Is their soul somehow not intact? No, they're a person, right? So I think that, unfortunately, culturally, or maybe it's a lack of like understanding on our part sometimes, that we don't fully see that with children. And I think it's time that as educators that we change that. We really see them as the full human beings that they are and they're just as deserving as respect and dignity and honor as any other adult, right? In fact, maybe even more because they are still developing, right? So when we look at our children, again, we don't want to just see their academics. We have to look at them holistically, look at the whole child. What's going on with them in terms of their physical health? Is there something going on? Do they have a sickness? Are they feeling good? Especially these days with everyone staying, at home, a lot of people staying at home with these Zoom classes and so on all around the world. How is their physical health? As teachers, we want to connect on that level. What's going on with them socially, right? I know that, sometimes we forget that kids are also social. A lot of these kids, they're at home, they're kind of cooped up. They haven't seen their friends in a long time. What's going on with them socially? How can I connect there? Emotional level. What's going on with them emotionally? Are they about to flip their lid? How can I connect? What can I do to ease that? How can I, help them if they need help? What's going on with their mental health? Environment. What's going on in their environment? Where do they live? What kind of environment are they growing in? Do I know the background of these children? What are their relationships, their family circumstances that are affecting this child that I should be aware of and trying to connect with? Identity development is happening for children, right? How am I supporting their identity development? And that's something really important for us to think about, because our children are, again, we cannot narrowly define them as just needing academics. They need all of these things from us as teachers. How are we helping them to identify with their identity development? Am I being a good role model? How can I help? Especially as like Muslim children who might be living in non-Muslim countries, right? And again, of course, academic is there. Equity. Are they, how are they facing equity issues? Do they belong to a certain, I know here in America, for example, that's something that we really have to think about with the racial climate in America. What is going on with these kids? What are they dealing with? Cognitive development. And of course, and probably, most importantly, their spiritual development we have to consider. So I have a little video here that I'd like to share with you all. I'm sharing the video with you for two reasons. One is because it actually has a lot of good information, and also because videos are really impactful, especially if you guys are doing, online learning. It's really important to have audio visual as well. We'll talk more about that later on. But I'm going to go ahead and play this video for you all.
The driver for learning is the social connection. Activating a child's cognitive skills begins with activating their social connectedness. Children in this school are starting the day with an adult saying to them, I see you, I know you, I'm connecting with you, and you're important to me.
We start each day by greeting every kid at the door. Good morning, Declan.
You look pretty this time.
Thank you, baby. Every classroom does some variation of, would you like a high five, handshake, or hug? Essentially, it's what greeting would you like?
How you doing, handsome? Good.
There is a great deal of cultural sensitivity and empowerment for children to say, here is how I want to greet you.
High five, handshake, or hug. You got your hair done? Good morning, Molly. You got your hair done? Let me see your arm. I love it. All right, you're gonna have a good day today? All right. High five, handshake, or hug. During that time, I'm just trying to connect with them. All right, help them from the transition from home to school. It just kind of is like a pulse check to see where they are. Oh, I knew you wanted a hug. How are you feeling today, sir? Good. We have a good day? Look at my eyes. Do they look escalated? Do they look triggered? Do they look upset? So it's a way for me to see, okay, who needs to be where? How can I help? How can I be assistance to start their day off most effectively? Good morning, Ariana. How you doing today? I'm being very intentional about my interactions with students, right? So it's not just I'm in the back of the room, hey, come in. No, I'm making a connection with them. I have eye contact with them. I'm checking in how they're doing. I'm checking to make sure they're okay. Good morning, friends. Good morning. I think the impact is deep relationships. I get to know my students. I get to check in with them. I get to find out something about them. They get to find out something about me. We get to make a connection. And that starts with the greeting at the door. All right, come on in.
So a child is walking in the door feeling cared for, empowered, and encouraged. And that teacher is focusing in on who that child is. And that's how the day starts.
Okay. So I really like that video. Again, two reasons we kind of showed this, or decided to show this one, is because it really, really highlights how this teacher is using this one strategy of the morning greeting and using that to really gauge and build a connection with her students. I thought that was really cute. And, obviously this would be appropriate for preschool, maybe kindergarten. And as they get older, obviously you're not going to have a greeting like that, for sure. But, with the little ones, when they're so young and tender and they're, just coming out of their mother's laps, essentially, having that kind of a connection with their students to really get a pulse and get a check to see how is the kid feeling this morning? Did he have his breakfast? Is he upset? Is he it also gives the kids an opportunity to let the teacher know right off of the bat. Because sometimes kids walk into the classroom and they just want to tell you I missed the school bus this morning or whatever it is. And this gives them that opportunity to in the morning, just go ahead and let the teacher know the most important thing to them, right at the greeting time. It's a really, really important way I would recommend for sure for younger, teachers of those who are, kindergarten, first grade, pre-K for sure, to do something like this. And with the older ones, find a more of an age appropriate way of doing a morning connection meeting with each and every student. So when we're talking about teacher and student, there's a few ways that we can build that connection. The first one that we talked about in the video is greetings. And if you're on Zoom, I think it's very, very important, and I highly recommend that you greet each student as they're coming into the Zoom. The Zoom has the feature, right? You're letting them in one by one. You can greet them as they're coming in and greet them with their name. This is what I meant earlier when I said see the child. I think it's really important to know that you're talking to a child who's a whole human being and really seeing them that way. And again, just like you wouldn't walk into a room of adults and just, basically not greet them or not ask them how are they doing or something like that. You wouldn't do that to a group of adults. Children are deserving of that same respect and remembering that these are whole human beings. And then remembering how our beloved prophet, peace be upon him and his family, how did he used to greet children? How did he behave with them? How did he make each of them feel special and give them that attention, right? Play. Play is really, really important and super overlooked when it comes to connection with students. Play and have fun with students. It could be simple ways of having fun with students. If you're a full-time, if you're working in a full-time Islamic school, going out into the playground, every once in a while and just tossing a ball around with them. The kids will never forget that. Those are the things that if you think back into your old childhood, you remember those things. I remember that teacher used to come and, played, toss the ball around with us sometimes, or, do jump rope with us or something. You remember those things. You remember those teachers, right? Because play is a huge form of connection. It's a huge form of connection for children, right? And play is the work of childhood, right? If you really think about it. So try and meet them where they are. It means the world to children. And through that connection that you're building while you're playing, you'll have access to the information that you're looking for with that child. Maybe, Yusuf or Yusra isn't really just a naughty kid who's distracted. Maybe Yusuf and Yusra has an issue that they have at home, and they would never have opened up to you about it if they couldn't connect with you through play, right? Maybe later on after playing, they'll feel comfortable to come talk to you about something that they maybe never otherwise would have because they didn't have that connection with you. And remember, we're going back to this concept that all learning is based on connection, and no significant learning can happen without these good relationships, right? Another important one is sharing your life story. So teacher to student connection isn't just one way, right? No relationship exists as a one-way street. All good relationships are what? Two-way streets. So just like you want your students to connect with you and share things about their life with you, and so that you can be a source of mentorship for them, you have to share some of yourself with your students. And again, I think this goes without saying, but you want to keep it appropriate. Obviously, you're not going to teach them or share things that are inappropriate, but using those examples from your life, right? Sometimes telling them, oh yeah, well, this happened to me last week, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the lesson that I learned. And when they hear those real human connections and seeing you as not just this figure that comes into the classroom every Sunday who they just have to listen to while learning, about Quran or learning about aqaid or whatever it is. But they really see you as a human being with the life and, children of your own or whatever the situation is. And they see you as someone that they can connect with. That it blooms. That relationship that you're looking for blooms. Again, just like any other relationship. Remember, see the child, the item number 2 on this list. See the child, see the human. Just like you can't connect with an adult who, it's only one-way relationship, same thing goes with a child, right? And finally, I have learn more about them. One way I like to learn about students is to have, if it's the beginning of the year, is I always start with some sort of a quiz or all about, about me kind of a form that they fill out, or if they're really young, they can draw pictures telling me about their life, whatever it is, some things that I can do to learn about them. And I make an effort also to find out about the family, see if I can connect with the parents in some way, so that again, those avenues for connection are open. I just did a time check and I see it's 8:30. So I did say I wanted to give a 15-minute break at the midway. I'm going to finish this slide and then I promise I will follow up on that. Okay. Now, again, connections, it's teacher to student, but there's also student to student, right? So really healthy learning environment is always going to have student to student connections happening and building of a student community. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're really here for. Because the whole point of all of these things that we do as teachers, making these, these Islamic schools and these madrasas and these weekend schools, at the end of the day is because we want to have a community, right? A Muslim community. So again, we want to focus on creating the opportunities for students to connect with one another, because that's what this is all about at the end of the day, right? Building the community. So I would say group work is really, go back. Group work is really important, having opportunities for students to work with one another, because they need to be building their communities and having those student to student connections. And even if you're teaching on Zoom, it's harder for sure, just like, teaching in general on Zoom is much harder, but it's still possible through the use of things like breakout rooms. And I have some other ideas of apps and things that you can use later on, but it's not impossible. You can still find ways of grouping students so that they can connect with each other in an online environment as well. Partner work, socialization opportunities. This is a really important one. Having things that students can do that really are just about socializing. Like, for example, having, in some of the schools that I've worked with, we've had a breakfast with the teacher, once a month or something like that. Something very simple. You bring a few bagels, some cream cheese, or whatever part of the world you are in. I don't know what's popular there for breakfast items, some eggs and toast or whatever. And, the food is an excuse to get together and just socialize, build that community, have those connections going. Because remember, again, I'm going to keep on repeating this because it's kind of like the mantra for for our session today, that real learning only happens when there's strong connections. And I want to have strong connections, right? As a teacher, that should be always in the forefront of your mind. How am I building connections? How am I building strong relationships so that I can really make the lessons that I'm teaching actually stick? So that my students really remember all of this content at the end of the day, right? Service projects. Service projects are things where kids are both socializing and also doing something really impactful at the same time. So it's combining two concepts. So an idea of a service project, or an example of things that we've done in the past in some of the schools I've worked in, is one classroom would, for example, say, okay, we're going to make 30 bags for the homeless. And the students would get together and brainstorm how they're going to make those bags. And they get together and figure out how they're going to distribute these bags for the homeless, these bags that had toiletry kits and gloves and hats and things to help, those around them. So, I mean, those kinds of projects are really important because it combines multiple concepts, right? It helps them with their socialization. It helps them with understanding the importance of service to humanity. It helps them with so many other things. But again, for this purpose, we're talking about the community building that it builds. They'll never forget that project that they did with their class. The sense of community that they had, that connection, that deep connection, knowing that they did this project together as a group, right? And finally, one of my most important and my favorite things is classroom meetings. Having regular classroom meetings is so, so key to building community. In my classrooms, when I was teaching, and I haven't been in the classroom as a teacher for a while, but I still recommend it to all the teachers who I work with. I always had Monday morning meetings. Our Monday morning meetings lasted for like almost an hour. And some teachers, I know like a lot of traditional teachers would think, wow, what a waste. Like you're wasting like an hour of your instructional time to have a meeting. But in reality, that was probably the most like impactful time I had with my students. Because that was a time for us to sit down and talk about our weekends, talk about our week, reflect, do muraqaba, do appreciations with one another, talk about some of the problems we've been having in our classroom for the past couple of weeks, address those problems, have everyone's voice be heard. Though this is a very, very important concept, and we shouldn't ever think of it as a waste of time, because when you do these things, they're actually preventative. When we have connection, when we have community, when we have something like a classroom meeting, what you're doing is doing something that's going to prevent future problems. I can guarantee you the classrooms that have classroom meetings regularly are going to have less behavior issues because those things are being prevented. It's a preventative measure. You talk about those things in your classroom meetings. They're going to have more engagement because those students feel connected to their teacher. Those students feel connected to each other, right? These are the things to kind of keep in mind as we're trying to, inshallah, build our connections in our classroom. So I know I've gone over my projected time, but not for too long. Now, I said we would have a 15-minute break, but before we go to that break, I have something called an exit ticket. An exit ticket is another strategy. It's basically a way for you to kind of get some accountability on the part of your students, whoever your students are, right? It's something that they need to do before they can go to break or before the end of the day. And so what we're using today is Flipgrid. And Flipgrid, for those of you who don't know about it, is essentially an app that you can use where you can record a video, and those videos will be available to everyone who's in that class. It's a really awesome tool to use, these days, as we're all, as most of us are dealing with COVID-19, all these Zoom classrooms. So what I'd like to ask you all to do is please go to this website right here, flipgrid.com, and I'm actually going to click on this, and I'm going to copy and put this in the chat. Brother Ishaq, are you able to put this in the chat for me?
Yeah, which one can you Flipgrid?
Yes.
You can put it in the chat for everyone as well.
Here, actually, you know what? I think I just got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. That should be easy for everyone. You can just click on it through the chat. And so what I'd like for you all to do, please, is to go to Flipgrid. Check it out. Again, it's a really cool tool that you can use in your classrooms. You can record a response, and the question is right here. What is one way you can build connections in your classroom? It can be an idea you picked up that we talked about, or it can be something that you have done on your own, or an idea that came to you, and make a quick recording of a response. After you've done that, inshallah, we're going to have a quick, I would say like 10-minute break after that, or I'll put the timer on for 15 minutes. And then we will reconvene. So here's our break time. Can you all see the screen still?
Yes.
Okay, good. And I'm going to start the timer. Okay, so inshallah, everyone's going to do their Flipgrid, do a quick little recording.
Question.
I'm sorry?
Can you please repeat the question, please?
Yeah, it's on the Flipgrid. If you go back.
Okay.
Let me go back to Flipgrid. If you go right over here onto the link that I sent you, you're just going to take you to this page where it says connections in the classroom. And right underneath there, the question, which is very kind of small, you can't see it as well, but the question is, what is one way that you can build connections in your classroom? Okay.
Thank you.
And then what you're welcome. And then what you're going to do is record your video. I think it's like 60 seconds or less. You're just going to record yourself saying what your answer is to that and then submit it. And the cool thing about it is this is going to be there for everyone to go through. So after the session is over, you can go through and see what everyone's answers were. And again, this is a really cool tool that you can use in your classrooms for students to build connections with each other and learn from one another. Okay. And so I'm going to start the timer. Everyone can turn their cameras off, and we'll meet you back here in 15 minutes. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I believe break time is over and I might have lost track of my time a little bit there. So forgive me for that, please. Everyone, welcome back. As you're coming back in, put your mics on. I'm sorry, not mics on, cameras on. Cameras on, mics off for now, I guess. And this timer is going out. This is another thing that you can use with your classrooms if you're doing Zoom classes and you're giving breaks to your students. I just embedded a quick little 15-minute video in my Google Slides from YouTube. It's very easy to do. So if you're using Google Presentation, this is something you can do. Just, basically look it up and it's quite easy. And if you ever need help with any of these things, I'm going to give my contact information at the very end of the presentation, and you are all very free to contact me. I don't know if you all got a chance to check out some of the Flipgrids that came in. MashaAllah, I haven't gotten a chance to see them all yet, but you guys are amazing. You guys have a wealth of, knowledge amongst yourselves, and that's the beauty of creating a community. Again, that idea of connection is that there's no one human being who is more knowledgeable than all of us together, and that's an idea that we want to espouse upon our students and our children, and it's something important for us to practice as well. I think always trying to find ways of learning more together. So when you get a chance, please do go and check out that Flipgrid. We have some amazing videos, and again, you can go on there and you can like and comment on each other's videos as well. Another great tip for building community in this if you're doing the online teaching right now. Okay, so the time is now nearly 9 o'clock, and I know you have a hard stop at 9:30. I'm going to do my very best to go through some more slides and give you guys a little bit more content on as far as like teaching strategies go. I might skip a little bit because I did get a lot of questions that were private messaged to me, and I do want to try and get to as many of those that I can. And I'll open up the floor for Q&A as well. I'll probably try and allocate at least 20 minutes for that, or maybe 15 minutes, depending on how much time we have, inshallah. And one person actually gave me a really sweet comment, a reminder. And she said that, we're talking about connection and that she didn't, and I was talking a lot about greeting, but I didn't actually she didn't hear at least my introduction of myself. So I apologize if you came late. I didn't actually, when I started speaking, I didn't introduce myself formally because Brother Ishaq had done that right before I came on. But I apologize for that if you guys had entered later on. I do believe there's a big number of you who have. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and continue on, inshallah. And we're going to talk a bit about the other component of a highly effective classroom teacher, which is, sorry, I'm a little distracted by these pictures here. Okay, which is classroom management. And I have something I'd like to read here. In a study reviewing 11,000 pieces of research that spanned over 50 years, actually, researchers have repeatedly determined that are 28 factors that influence student learning, and that these have been ranked. The most important amongst them is classroom management. How you manage the classroom is the primary determinant of how well your students will learn. So classroom management itself is a huge topic, and oftentimes what ends up happening is that we confuse classroom management with discipline. And we think classroom management just means, okay, discipline. So basically I have to discipline my students, and that's what's going to make me great at classroom management, which is going to make me a great teacher. But in reality, as you can see here, looking at this little diagram, classroom management has a lot of topics, and it's a huge part of teaching. And we've already talked about a big part of it, which is the idea of connection. And if you look over, actually, it's not even really on here, but connection is actually something that even really overshadows. It basically touches all areas of teaching. It's not just a part of classroom management. It's not just part of your content management. It's not just part of your social emotional learning. It's really part of everything that you're doing. Because again, going back to this idea, and I'm going to drill it in, connection forming relationships is everything. It's the foundation of what we're trying to do as teachers. And we also want to remember this, and this is something that I try and remind myself all the time, is the reason why connection is important, because ultimately, as for those of you who are parents, you know this, your children are so attached to you, right? When they come into this world as babies, they literally come from your womb, and then they're stuck onto you, and they literally feed from you as a mother, and they have to sleep next to you, and just your physical touch, they literally physically have to be with you, right? They're so connected to you. And through that connection, your children are essentially learning to find the connection to Allah, right? And that's what this life for us as Muslims is, right? Trying to find a connection to Allah and trying to strengthen our connection to Allah. So again, going back to this idea that all learning, the importance of learning is really about forming those connections. I kind of lost my train of thought here, but we're talking about classroom management now. And what I'll do is I'll try and talk a bit about some of these components, and I'll really focus on the importance of forming connections that engage your students in your learning, and some of the strategies that we can continue to use to build that engagement and that excitement in the classroom as tools to, again, build that connection and deepen that learning. So this is from Dr. Harry Wong's book. He says there are the three most important words for a teacher on a practical level are right here. Everyone just, before I click on it though, I want you to think, what do you think the three words might be? If you had to think of like the three words that are most important words for a teacher on a practical level. I'm not talking about like, I don't want, not the answers like, Allah and, spirituality and all those things. Yes, alhamdulillah, 100%. We already know that. But on a practical level, what are they?
I think patience.
Patience is a good one. Definitely a necessary one. Okay, in his book, he says this: preparation, preparation, preparation. The room is ready, the work is ready, the teacher is ready. I'm going to go through this very quickly again, because I really do want to leave time for Q&A, because I got some amazing questions. But I want to just get this point across, which is really important. In order to have really strong classroom management and to have all those great connections, you need to be prepared as a teacher. Teaching is a very deliberate thing. Teaching is very deliberate, and I'm going to repeat that. Teaching is very deliberate. As a teacher, you can only wing it so far and get so far. Some people, they're naturally very charismatic, or they've got a great personality and they're very funny, or they're really good at like telling stories like off the cuff of their hand. And so they can wing it, they can go into their Sunday school classroom and like, just flip through the book, like, the moment before they get there, and kind of like, kind of get the lesson and then like wing it, right? But that'll honestly, truly only take you so far. All of the best teachers, the most successful teachers, and going back to the theme of this whole thing, the most effective teachers are the teachers who are prepared, who have thought through, their learning environment, have thought through, what the work is for the day, what their classroom is for the day, and they themselves are ready. Remember, the teacher is ready. Remember what we did earlier, that exercise, thinking about, where are we mentally? Are we in a state where we're fully connected, our brain is intact, we're thinking with our prefrontal cortex, or did I have a rough day? Am I like not having a good morning today? Did I get pulled over by the police and get a ticket this morning on my way to work, right? Or on my way to the masjid or the madrasa? Again, all of these things are important, because a prepared teacher, a teacher who is ready in all of these different ways, is going to be present and really able to connect with the students. Another quote, keeping with the theme of, old Greek people, it is how you begin that is the most important. So I'm going to go again through these very briefly. I'm going to show you quickly a classroom. How does this classroom make you feel? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Go ahead. How do you feel? I mean, to me, like, and I wish that we had time to go through and get all of your responses through Slido or something, but I don't think we do. But I think, it feels a little chaotic. It feels messy. It feels overwhelming. It feels, I feel lost. I don't feel like I can learn in there. Unfortunately, if you go and visit a lot of our classrooms, our masajid, sometimes our our Sunday school classrooms or our Saturday school classrooms are, you know, like half the time they're used as storage, half the time they're used as, you know, where we put like the lost and found items and so on. You know, we want to have an environment that has nizam, right? That has orderliness. It is again, and again, it goes back to this concept of, you know, Allah created order in this world. We are meant to want order and routine and cleanliness. So again, the room is ready. I'm going to go again, going through these very, very quickly. Another very important component that you need to have in your classroom, whether it's your physical classroom or your Zoom classroom, is you need to have a daily schedule or set up for your students. This is an example of what one might look like in a classroom for elementary age students. This might be one for like subject teachers in middle school or high school. Or if you're teaching online on Zoom, I didn't put the example here, but you know, it could be like you posting what's happening for the day, starting with, you know, the few lessons you're teaching today. You know, it could, even if it's only 2 or 3 things, always try and have your agenda or your schedule posted. If you all noticed when I started this workshop, I had my agenda posted in the beginning, right? Why? Why do we do that? Why? Because what happens is we want to have our kids feel like they know what's coming next, right? We don't want to have this cognitive load that's unnecessary on them, this idea of what's happening next. I have no idea. What do I expect? When are we going to lunch? When do we get a break? Is she going to give us a break? I know some of you were messaging. Is she going to give us a break? It's Salat time. Am I going to get that break? Am I not? Right? These are the things that happen with our kids too. Again, remember, see the whole child. See the child as a human being. The child also has these questions. They want to know what's going to be happening for the next 2-3 hours or the next 6 hours if they're with you all day long. So again, remember, see the child, see the whole human being, treat them with the same dignity and honor as you would do any other human being. They want to know what their schedule is going to be like for the rest of the day. Again, see the child. Building community. This is really important when it comes to connection building in the classroom. In every classroom, I highly, highly, highly encourage, it doesn't matter what subject you teach, if you're a full, if you're just, if you're teaching 2nd grade, if you're teaching high school, if you're teaching just Quran class, just Islamic studies class, just Arabic, doesn't matter what subject, having some kind of classroom jobs is very important for your students in order to feel like they're part of the community. They belong. It helps them in so many different ways. It helps them with responsibility. It helps them with decision making. It helps them build some of those really important social emotional learning skills that we want them to have. It helps them feel, most importantly, at least for our conversation today, feel what? Connected. Connected. They are a part of this community. They are a part of this classroom. And I know it's more difficult when we're talking about Zoom classrooms and everything being digital, and you don't need someone to turn on the lights in the Zoom classroom when you do in the classroom, while you do in the regular classroom. But even still, there can still be some things that you do as a classroom job, and maybe not as many, so you have to rotate them. But there's still some you can do. Like, for example, maybe you can have one person who is, I used to do this in one of my classes, is I had the person who would recite adhan, mu'adhin. We had a mu'adhin, and that person's job was that they would recite the adhan right, for everyone right before we went to salat. And it would kind of rotate, right? So that was a classroom job. You could still do that even in your Zoom classrooms. Or maybe you start your class every single day, even your Zoom classroom, even if it's online for an hour, you have a different person each week who's responsible for reciting the surah in the beginning of the class, right? Or they recite a dua at the end of the class, or whatever it is, and you can give it a cool name, like the Maulana for the week, or like the young scholar for the week, so that the kids feel like there's a sense of community and that there's a deeper connection for them. And I already talked to you a bit about classroom meetings, and I'm going to do a time check. So I think I kind of touched on the importance of classroom meeting before, so I'll skip that right now. This is a really good video that talks about the importance of jobs, classroom jobs. I'll go ahead and play it, and I'll probably cut it short just for the sake of saving time in case we need. And again, I'll send all of these slides out, so inshallah, if you'd like to, you can watch the whole video later on. Oop.
I feel that jobs are a mandatory responsibility for our students in our classroom. I tell them the very first day of school, welcome to the first day of your work for the year. We're at our job every time that we come to school. So my job is to be the best teacher I can be, and their job is to be the best student. But I also give them each a job for an entire week. Now, when I first started teaching, I thought it was important to have a light helper and a line leader and a door holder and maybe the caboose who stands at the end of the line. But as my experience has gone forward, I have found that every child thrives off having responsibility every day. So I have 14 children this year and I have 14 jobs. I change those jobs weekly, but now my jobs have expanded to a calendar helper, a meteorologist, a snack helper, an electrician. I like to use the whole word, and they thrive off using big words. I have a job even for watering plants and a job to do every little thing. My favorite, teacher assistant. They will do anything for me. But everything that I can think of throughout the day that I might need a little bit of assistance with, and the kids just love having that responsibility. They take pride in it and enjoy.
Okay, so I just cut it off there. There wasn't much more to that video, but I think that, again, showing you the video to show you, videos are very impactful when, learning, but also she does a great job of kind of showing what it looks like in a regular classroom setting. And you can find ways of being creative. And there's really cute ideas. If you look them up online for classroom jobs, you'll get some great ideas. Okay, another really important strategy that we should be aware of when we're trying to maintain connections in the classroom is the idea that sometimes in order to connect, you need to take a break and, either give a moment for reflection or using some mindfulness strategies, or giving brain breaks where, you need the kids to become more active. So I'm going to give you an example of both so you kind of get an idea of what I mean. So for this first set here, these are things that I would do and I would recommend when let's say we just played a game as a class, or we just had like a Kahoot, or we just did some kind of like group projects and everyone was already kind of everywhere. And now we want to kind of come back and reflect on ourselves so that we can connect back to like our lesson, right? And connect back with one another. So this is an example. So you see over here, the mindfulness 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I would tell the kids, okay, and I want you guys to all do this with me right now. Everyone, I want you to take a moment, just sit in your chair and relax and kind of, maybe roll your shoulders back and think of and look around maybe 5 things that you can see. 4 things you can touch. 3 things that you can hear. 2 things that you can smell. 1 thing you can taste. Okay, how was that? Everyone's thirsty. I see everyone grabbing their water. SubhanAllah.
It calmed my mind down a bit. The energy level wasn't low, I would say, but just calm, reflected. It's kind of brought a bit of a peace in the room. I'm on my own, but it feels like peaceful now.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, sometimes in order to connect, we need to slow down. And it's amazing because I saw so many people in the gallery just pick up their water and drink. And I also realized I'm so thirsty. SubhanAllah, sometimes just doing these mindfulness practices really helps us connect with ourselves. And if you can't connect with yourself, first and foremost, you're not connecting with anyone else, right? It's hard to connect. So this is a strategy you can use to help slow things down and bring your students back in so that they're ready and able to focus and connect with you and connect with the lesson that you're about to share. Another thing that you can do, which I love doing, is having just 60 seconds of reflection. And this is kind of my go-to video. I use this all the snuck away from me. I use this one here. It's just a quick little YouTube video, and it plays like hours of like little nature sounds. As you listen to it, you can just close your eyes for 20 seconds. Okay, I'm again making it short in the interest of time. This is another strategy you can use in your classrooms is, you know, we can connect so easily and so much more easily when we connect to Allah's, I think, creation, right? Sometimes we don't have the opportunity, especially with these Zoom classes, to really go outside. And, you know, if you could, I would highly recommend it to go outside every once in a while with the kids and just like relax in like a, you know, if you have some green space, some, you know, somewhere you can sit on the grass or something and do this, it's great. But if in the absence of that, you know, use your technology resources. Do a quick little reset, 60 seconds. Everyone come in, have a seat. We're gonna close our eyes and just relax. We're listening to the sound of Allah's creation. 60 seconds.
Can we use this method as they come in or halfway through or anytime?
I would definitely say it's a great transition. If your kids are coming in, like for example, from PE class, and they're very, very active and they're everywhere, and you want them to kind of come and slow down and transition into a lesson and be able to connect, I would say it's a great time. It's great for when everyone is, you know, their focus is kind of everywhere and they're not really centered. So beginning of lesson, end of lesson, middle of lesson, you really kind of have to use your intuition and kind of gauge the room. But anytime you really want to bring the energy to more focus level, I don't want to say to bring the energy down, because it's not. As you all noticed, when we did the mindfulness 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it doesn't bring your energy down. It focuses your energy, right? So this would give you the same effect.
So this is a great way, instead of shouting at the kids and telling them to be quiet and sit down, and you relaxed yourself and the kids, otherwise you're all hyped up yourself.
Absolutely.
So, excellent. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Sister Nazeera, can I also quickly ask a question?
Sure.
Those are really good strategies for younger kids. I think, yes, they're very hyper and they need to be settled down. Now, my issue is I have older children, and on Saturday mornings, because our madrasa is on Saturday, they're normally quite sleepy, actually. It's actually the other way around. Do you have any strategies to actually wake them up?
I do. Thank you for asking. That's a great segue into my next slide. Here we go. Okay, sometimes you really need to give them a brain break. So let's say you're in a situation like the sister, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, sister, just mentioned, where they're sleepy. They've just come in the morning and they're not fully awake. Or what's more likely, and it happens a lot, especially with these Zoom classes, they just can't sit for that long, right? And a good rule of thumb here, I'll mention this now, another good teaching strategy, is that kids and people in general really can only focus for the same number of years that they are. So if you have a 7-year-old, they can really only focus for about 7 minutes long, okay? And I know that's heartbreaking to all these teachers who love to lecture for like 30 minutes and they don't wonder why the kids aren't able to focus, and they're, you know, it's really not, it's just developmentally, that's how long their attention span really is. You have a 10-year-old, it's 10 minutes, you have 5-year-olds, it's 5 minutes. And the way you deal with that is you change it up. You constantly have to keep changing it up. So, you know, you don't expect them to be able to focus on one thing for so long. You have to break it up somehow for them. And that's just very developmentally normal. So brain breaks, how do we do it? We have a couple that we can do. You can have the kids come in and have them just literally stand up, get up, and tell them to start moving their body. You say, okay, everyone get up. We're doing 15 jumping jacks right now. Let's go. They stand up, they do it. You do it with them. You model. Again, remember, we're connecting, we're modeling. You do those 15 jumping jacks with them. You do the 20 jumping jacks. You do whatever it is. You just get them to move their body. when you get the body to move, the blood is flowing, the blood is going back to the brain. That's what you want to have happen. And sometimes when the kids are sitting in a lesson for too long, like they're sitting and you're talking for 7 minutes and you realize at some point you kind of just lost them, they look a little lost. That's another good time for you to pick them up and tell them, okay, guys, let's get up. And I want to see all of my second graders get up and start to chomp like a shark. Come on, everybody, show me your chomping mouth. Let's go, chomp, chomp, chomp. Oh, good job, Yusra. That looks like you're chomping on your pillow or whatever, right? You really want to get them to do things to get up and give their brain a break. That's why it's called a brain break, because you want to give their brain a break and release the cognitive tension that's there. If there is cognitive tension, and get the blood flowing and get them ready to transition to the next thing. Or in the case of the sister, how you asked, when they come in and they're sleepy, you're not really relieving cognitive tension, but what you are doing is activating their body to then activate their mind and get them ready to learn something new. So it's really basically it's giving them opportunity to get up and stretch and move and do something, jump like a dolphin, float like a jellyfish, touch your toes, run in place, do some arm circles, whatever it is, just to really switch it up and give them time for movement. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. And I just realized it's 9:20, and I had, a few more slides that I wanted to get through, but I don't think that I will be able to. Inshallah, I will share this with you all later on. I would like to go ahead and perhaps open it up for, yeah, why don't I go ahead and open it up for Q&A at this time. Brother Ishaq, can you help me with seeing if there's any questions in the chat? If you all have questions in the chat, you can do that. Or if you want to, just go ahead and unmute yourself. And if you feel comfortable asking your questions that way, that's also totally fine.
Yeah, due to the time, if everyone can just raise their hand and then one by one, they can ask the questions based on the hands, because we do have a class after this. So
okay. All right, no problem. And I did have that content, which I really want to share with you guys, but inshallah, perhaps there'll be another session. I would love to dig a little bit deeper into some ways we connect with our students. Do we have any questions? Okay, Sister Rukia.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you for the wonderful presentation. We were engaged, active, and lots of strategies that we can take back to the classroom. I just wanted to know, are we going to have you again next Sunday?
I don't believe it will be me. It'll be somebody else.
Oh, wow. Oh, well. Okay, thank you very much.
But inshallah, perhaps in the future, just because I didn't get to go through all of the content I had planned for you all, so perhaps we can work something out in the future. I can talk to Brother Ishaq about that.
Thank you very much.
Of course, of course.
Do you have a question, Sister Nazeera, please?
Sure. Sorry, I don't see who's speaking.
My name is Manazza. Apart from the madrasa, the Saturday school, I do teach Tajweed to kids in my spare time, and my kids are in teens. And I have to do it online because they live very far. I can't visit them to teach. So how do we connect when we have like 30 minutes and they are late? Mostly, they are getting back from school or their sports to reach online on time. So I really lose the first 5-10 minutes in just logging in from their end. So how do I connect with them during the lesson? Because, with Tajweed, like you really need all the time to let them repeat, and there's lots of mistakes. So they're doing the Quran the first time. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's tough. And I think that's a predicament that a lot of teachers find themselves in, where you really feel this pressure for like losing your instructional minutes, especially when you have online classes and transitions and whatnot. So you definitely know that you're not alone in that. I think it's just about trying to find ways that you have, to get creative. One way that I would recommend for a case like this is try and schedule out a time with like certain students and say, oh, Yusra or Yusuf, you have, we have a class on this coming Friday. And don't forget, this coming Friday, I'd like for you to stay after. And we're going to chat for like 7 minutes or like 5 minutes or something like that. And then that way you planned it out. And it can be a time that's outside of like, you know, those 5 minutes or whatever, where you can connect with them one-on-one on something really important. And or even, you know, not so important. It could just be like, hey, how's it going? How's your life? What, you know, I want to share this with you because I know you're into football and I saw this and I thought of you, and, you know, whatever it is, something that you can connect with them on. Just try and plan it out 5 minutes after class. And this also works for teachers who have rotating students. Like, let's say you're teaching, you know, social studies, and, you know, you constantly have like, you know, you're seeing different kids every 30 minutes or something. You can do the same thing where you say, you know, you 3 kids stay, you know, let's say you group them, like, you know, student XYZ stay after on Monday, student ABC stay after on Tuesday, whatever it is. And then that way, by the time, like, you know, every 2 weeks rolls around, you've seen every student that you have, because you're just kind of rotating them. That's just one example. Yeah.
Sister, I have a question.
Sure.
Asim Diana. I want to, first of all, Assalamu alaikum. I want to ask you, what if there are kids, the age is same, for example, the kids in the class are 10 years old, but a few of them have never been to a madrasa, few of them are not on the same page. So how can you deal the kids who are on are not on the same page? Or if a kid is slow in understanding, he doesn't picks up things easily, he feels difficulty in understand things, but the age group is the same. So how can you handle and tackle this kind of a situation?
That's such a good question, Sister Asima. So the short answer for that is to always remember, keep this in your mind, that you're not teaching curriculum, you are teaching students. Sometimes we get caught up in this idea that I'm teaching this book. You know, I'm responsible for this book. I'm responsible for teaching this curriculum. But at the end of the day, what we're really truly responsible for is teaching the students and meeting the students where they are. So the way, you know, and Sister Asma, you asked a very, and forgive me if I mispronounce your name, please. You asked a question that is, there's a strategy, it's called differentiation. And it's actually something that I was hoping that I would be able to get to today. When they asked me today, what did I want to speak to? Or when they asked me a few months ago for today's topic, I was thinking of doing differentiation because it's such a needed topic. And it definitely needs its own workshop for sure on how do you differentiate for different types of learners in your classroom. And there's like 3 different ways of doing it. I wouldn't be able to tell you all the details of that right now, but essentially the backbone of the concept of differentiation is that you need to remember that don't worry about the content as much as just worry about the student. Worry about where the student is, who the student is, where they are in their learning, and just get them moving in their own learning path. Not so much about the stress that we as educators sometimes feel. Like we feel this like, oh, I'm failing. This student is so behind. But no, you're not failing. If you get that student to move from A to B, you've done your job. Even if everyone else is at M and L and N or Z, whatever they are, right? Your job is just to move that student forward and differentiate your lessons so that you can kind of help them move forward. So Sister Asma, for sure, how about you and I connect on this later on, because I would love to sit down and show you and talk to you about some ways that we can do that in detail.
Sure. I would love to. Just let me know when can we connect.
Inshallah. I think I'll post my email address actually right now in here so that you guys can contact me if you'd like to.
Okay. Sister Nazeera, you said something really important. You said you're not teaching a curriculum, but teaching the student. It's very difficult because I always find that Islam is not based on a curriculum. It's not that you have to do certain things at a certain time, but the madrasa, the institute itself expects us teachers to do this. How do we overcome that? It's always been my argument against, with the madrasa leadership, that why do we have to follow a curriculum when we cannot connect and we cannot teach the student what we aim to in that time?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And, as an administrator, I can understand like the need for having a curriculum in place so that there is some kind of framework for everyone to work off of, to give kind of like essentially it's kind of like guideposts for learning, right? So in that sense, curriculum is very important. it helps us guide where our learning is going. Otherwise, without the curriculum, literally anyone could be teaching anything, right? So
it's more structured, yeah?
Exactly. So there's some structure to what's happening. But when we get into the nitty-gritty of things, it's really important to remember that the curriculum isn't what's going to guide your instruction as much as your students in meeting your students at wherever their needs are. Yes, the curriculum there is to support that, and the curriculum is there to guide that learning, but really you have to be looking at each and every single one of your students. And that's what this whole concept of personalization in learning and individualizing attention and learning really comes from, is because that's what we want to do, right? None of us are cookie cutter, human beings, right? If I look at, mashallah, I'm seeing all of your beautiful faces, everyone looks so different. All of your personalities are so different. Everything about you is different, right? I'm sure if I wanted to teach, if I wanted to, teach this class for the long term, I would have to really differentiate and meet each of you where you are. Like, for example, like I just talked to Sister Asim and I said, okay, you have a very specific case. Let's talk about that more one-on-one, because I want to meet her need where she is at right now. So that's, I can understand why school administration is asking for you to use curriculum, but I think it's just about having a conversation with them about those specific cases where you have to adjust the curriculum to meet the needs of your students and helping, and I'm sure you can have that conversation with your administrators and see if they can, understand where you're coming from as a teacher.
Can I have last question quickly?
Brother Ishaq is the boss, so
yeah, we are hitting at a time right now that is the problem is we have another class. So we would have to stop, but Sister Nazeera will put out the email, her email, where inshallah you can ask the questions. And also you guys are more than welcome to communicate with the admin team as well. Inshallah, we will try our best to get to them all one by one. And we also have great speakers lined up. We have Sheikh Salim Yusuf Farid and then also Dr. Nuh and others that everyone can benefit from, and then also the team with Sheikh Somali as well. But due to the time, we would have to end the session for today, unfortunately. But thank you everyone for attending the program. We benefited from Sister Nazeera's presence, and I would also like to thank Sister Nazeera Salak on behalf of the Al-Kisa team for attending today's program. And we will continue to have her more, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Brother Ishaq. He's the boss. We're going to go ahead and end our session here. Alhamdulillah, I feel blessed and honored to have been in the presence of all of you teachers and educators. May Allah bless you and reward you immensely for the beautiful work that you are doing. You're literally changing the world one student at a time. And I'm honored again, and I pray for you all. And I hope that you keep us in your prayers. And one last strategy, I'll sneak it in there before Brother Ishaq closes the Zoom, is that remember to pray for our students. As that's one of the most effective things we can do to be effective teachers, is to just pray for our students and pray for their well-being. And we do our best, and we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So thank you all. May Allah bless you. And we'll end it with a beautiful salawat.
Allah.
Thank you very much, sister.
All bold letters, just capital or small. Sister Nazeera, Sister Nazeera, you have put your email address, but it's all in bold, in capital letters. Is it in capital letters?
It doesn't matter. Either one. Doesn't matter.
Oh, it's fine.
Email is not case sensitive. Emails are not case sensitive.
Right.
Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Fi amanallah.
Jazakallah. Thank you very much, sister.
Jazakallah.
Thank you, ma'am.